Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ticket to Ride. How are you
Season
guys?
2. Season
Very
2.
good.
Season 2.
Since
Mike
that's right.
Polydorus, Paper Airplane, Thaddeus
Right.
Bouchard, Screen
Right.
Dollars, and me, Paul DeGarabedian, ComScore. We're here to talk about Super Bowl weekend, which
Right.
just happened. Then we're going to, right on the horizon, we're going to talk about the all-important, especially this year, well, every year, President's Weekend, and combined with Valentine's Day, which is always a very interesting one. We have a lot of great stats to share, so let's get right into it. We may actually even have some show and tell for those viewing this on YouTube or on various clips.
Well, I want to go back to the game for a second, which for
Yeah,
anyone who was watching it was over about 8 minutes into the first
that's
quarter.
true.
But I must say the snacks were really good. It was a really, it was kind of keeping an eye on the Sunday numbers because there had been a lot of talk, and I have not seen the overnight numbers yet. We're recording on Monday afternoon, and there was a lot of talk about Super Bowl fatigue, meaning, you had the Chiefs in their third straight. The Eagles this was the second year out of 3 that they were there, and a couple of indicators that the game didn't quite have the same cachet, so to speak, was the ticket prices on the secondary market were pretty much, I think what they said was at a low for like the last 10 years. And then Vegas was reporting, and Vegas, as you know, is a big destination for the Super Bowl. People want to go and have fun, bet the game, go to parties. They had an abundance of rooms available. You could,
Wow.
dirt cheap to go. So, and when you looked at it compared to other Super Bowl Sundays, yesterday was actually 2 or 3 points better than it probably should have been. But somebody brought up to me today that Saturday was actually not as big as it should be. And we always talk about this. And when you're looking at box office numbers, there's always an ebb and a flow. There's the Saturday bump on Friday, and then there's the Sunday decline. And normally on a Super Bowl Sunday, you would have seen or Super Bowl weekend, you would have seen a bigger kind of bump on Saturday. So that wasn't quite as much, but Sunday didn't have quite the decline. So I guess maybe it all evens out in the end.
Yeah, and I think it was around 54, 55 million, which was up 40 for the entire weekend for all films. That's up about 40% versus the 38.9 million that the total box office was for Super Bowl same weekend a year ago. That weekend was topped by Argyle in weekend 2 with a mere 6.2 million. So this was a much better weekend than the one last year. Now, we
Look at
have
that. What you got there, Paul? That's the
there we go, Mike. Your
that's
timing is brilliant.
fancy thing you put together.
Well, yeah, with a couple of footballs, and those are fair use football images, and so it's interesting to look back, and I love how Hannah Montana, the Miley Cyrus Best of Both Worlds tour, powered a $128 million Super Bowl overall frame. Obviously, that's a 3-day frame, Friday through Sunday. And that was a G-rated concert movie. But I think what's particularly interesting about this chart is the column that says Super Bowl weekend percent change versus the previous weekend. So virtually in every single year, at least going back to like 2006 on this chart, you saw a decline anywhere from 8.4%, which was a nominal decline, to a 30, actually this year, a 38% drop. And that's to be expected. We all know that it's Super Bowl weekend. The focus shifts to the gridiron. And let's face it, there was nothing, studios are reticent to put like their big tent poles on a weekend like that. But the numbers are clear. It's just Super Bowl weekend it can be a land of opportunity, let's say, for smaller films or a film like the 2 top earners for this past Super Bowl weekend with Hard Eyes and Love Hurts. So, never expect to be a blockbuster weekend, but not a total fumble this year.
Fumble. That's very funny. Nice pun. The other thing, when you look at it, Paul, going back to 2015 was kind of the last year that it broke the $100 million mark too.
Yeah.
Which kind of, over the last 10 years or so, I think the Super Bowl has kind of even evolved greater than it was prior to that, which is indicated in, and again, it's a bit, as you say, a self self-fulfilling prophecy because the studios stay away from the weekend. Therefore, the content that comes out isn't necessarily the kind of content that's going to generate the kind of grosses we're going to see next weekend. So that becomes it's a bit of a vicious cycle.
Wait, I think I just heard a shout out, Mike. I think I just heard a shout out to Dogman.
Yes, Dogman was sitting there and saying, "What are you talking about? I had a great weekend."
That's right. And American Sniper, led that weekend. That was weekend 6 for that movie. It opened in the previous year and then expanded.
But it built.
And actually, the week before had an $80 million, I believe, a weekend. So that really powered a nice weekend there. Thaddeus, I want to ask Thaddeus, like, from your point of view, like, what is it? Could the industry, like with Taken, for example, go counter programming, put a big movie out there, and kind of do a Hail Mary, hoping that they can succeed on a weekend that historically does not provide that kind of.
Well, I mean, sometimes sort of gaps, these sort of, the studios make their decisions about what they're going to release, obviously far in advance or relatively far in advance. And then they don't always get it right. Sometimes it seems like there's a gap in the release calendar, but some film is either building through a sort of platform progressive expansion type of release, or some film just kind of resonates that wasn't really expected to resonate. And so you have these surprises. So, could it happen, or, in February, we're talking about the February box office. Could it happen in February, or could it happen, we're going to transition to talk about other weekends in February, not just the Super Bowl weekend. But there's definitely, I feel anyways, there's opportunity, but you don't really know in advance all of the opportunities. Some films are obvious, they're going to do well. But other times, a film that's not so obvious does very, very well,
What about
Five Nights at Freddy's? I remember, just randomly off the top of my head, Five Nights at Freddy's. Whoever thought that it was opening, on streaming on the same day, and it took off. Who would have predicted that? So.
And what do you think about the idea that everyone tries to counter program to the Super Bowl, but again, Taken, American Sniper, which didn't open that weekend.
Well, there's a couple of examples on here of that exact thing. So Taken, if you remember, Taken is an interesting one that everybody kind of points back to. But Taken, at the time, the U.S. was the last market to open. That was a movie that had been sitting on the shelf. Fox was looking for something to do with it, and they picked Super Bowl weekend. Everybody assumed it would be kind of a throwaway. And if you could get a throwaway that does $24.7 million, we take it all day long. And then when you talk about the counter-programming ones, you have a couple of those, though, Paul. You have Dear John, you have Chronicle, and then one that I worked on, Warm Bodies. And I can tell you the thought process about Warm Bodies, if you remember the movie, it's a zombie love story. And it really played to a female audience. And again, that was our thought. Our thought was this would be a great counter-programming. We know that Sunday will get hurt, but at the same time, we also think it won't get hurt as much maybe as, a male action movie might do. And there you have it. So, I remember when Dear John opened, everybody, everybody's eyes were bugging out over the weekend. Again, it overperformed all expectations. So,
and Mike, this past weekend, Heart Eyes is sort of that kind of movie. It's like a horror love story kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, and again, not to the same level necessarily that is, but it, same idea as far as where we're going to go. So again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit on that. You can also see that, post-pandemic, the weekend has definitely probably, struggles probably a tough word, but it's had a lower box office than it had prior to that. And, this weekend, I mean, we'll be right around 54 million, which when you look at it outside of last year, I mean, that's right in line with the previous 3 post-pandemic Super Bowl weekends.
Well, it used to be that no one would open a summer movie in May, but now summer movies commonly open in May and do very, very well. So,
things
change over time too. Right?
To that point, Thaddeus, summer can start the last week of April in some cases.
Sure.
Avengers Endgame, April 26th.
You mentioned, or Thaddeus, you mentioned sometimes, assuming a weekend is not the weekend you open a movie. I'll never forget the original Saw, when we had the movie, we were trying to find when we should open the movie. And John Feltheimer, the CEO, suggested we go on Halloween weekend. And we all looked at him and said, Felt, you can't go holiday or Halloween weekend. Horror films don't open over Halloween weekend because you lose the Saturday because of Halloween parties. And Felt's logic was, just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean you can't do it.
Amen.
And when everybody else isn't doing something, I see that to be an opportunity. And the man was 100% correct. So to your point,
Barbie and Oppenheimer opening against each other. Who, you
well,
know,
again,
what a strategic error that was, right?
Well, but it's not even strategic, where it's taking a period in the calendar and saying to yourself, we can't open that movie that weekend because of whatever rules you put in place. You know, Felt's whole logic was, look, guys, you're making the rules as you go along. There are no rules. You know, as I like to say, there are no box office police.
And Mike, didn't you guys go Hunger Games on March 23 in 2012?
That was another one where, you know, leading up to that, you know, here was the biggest movie that the company had ever had. We looked at the release calendar up and down. David Spitz actually gets full credit on that one as well. I know we mentioned him with La La Land a couple weeks ago, but on Hunger Games, it all just kept coming back to that March period as being the perfect period to release that movie. We had some, you know, there were some spring breaks. We did have a little bit of precedent. Alice in Wonderland had gone out and did about $110 million. So it was like the box office is there if you have the movie. Now, no one thought we had a $154 million opener at all, but that ended up being, you know, opening up that corridor again. And again, what it really comes down to is if you have the content, the people will come.
And that's kind of a perfect transition to maybe talking about what's coming up is Presidents and Valentines, if we're ready to switch gears, or we could stay on Super Bowl. We could stay.
No. I think, you know, because over the course of, my gosh, the last 20 years or so, I would say that President's Day weekend, Valentine's Day weekend, which seem to dovetail each other quite a bit, has become one of the most lucrative weekends on the calendar.
And if you look at the titles on there, and we'll show them for those who want to go to our YouTube video, which you should check out. It's really interesting because you look at the, you know, people don't think, you know, Deadpool was not a summer movie at first. It was like put out there as a, you know, because they weren't sure what they had. And isn't it true? Often studios are going a month that isn't that competitive. Like Guardians of the Galaxy went in August, right? And people didn't know how it was going to do.
Well,
and
I mean,
you know,
not to cut you off, Paul, but look at 2018, right? Look at what we have here. We are looking at a $346 million weekend. That is crazy when you think of in February.
Makes summer look wimpy. I mean, that's incredible.
Think about it for a second.
Mike, for our audio listeners, what happened in 2018?
Oh yeah, good one.
Paul, you got the list. What was the?
I'm gonna pull that up. So, the top 5 movies. Okay, and this is for the 16th through the 19th. So the 4-day President's Weekend in 2018. And thank you, Thaddeus, because we can see it, but those just listening can't, and I appreciate that. So, Black Panther, which opened on the 16th, for the 4 days, for the 3 days did $202 million, but for that 4-day stretch that powered that $346 million, actually, this movie accounted for 70% of that weekend, for the 4-day period. $242.1 million for Black Panther, and then Peter Rabbit at 23.4, 50 Shades Freed. Now, not all these opened on that weekend, to be fair. They were all holdovers, but Black Panther just blew the doors off on that weekend, and so that meant that Valentine's Day itself was on a Wednesday, but they opened Black Panther on that date. What an incredible. And I believe that wound up being the highest grossing movie of 2018.
You got to think about that.
Let's give that a little.
That's like 4% of. That's like 4% of the box office of the entire year happened in those 4 days on that one film.
Well, and I was going to say, let's give it a little perspective from last year. The entire month of February, I believe, was about $330 million
Right.
all in. So you're saying 4 days
Right.
of
Yeah, that's a
2018
great point.
blew that away.
In fact, I'm going to look that up. Mike, what did you say the entire month of February? I'm going to go into the engine room.
Yeah,
We
the
can do
entire
sound
month of
effects of an engine room right
February
now.
in 2024, I believe,
Uh,
was about $330 million, give or take.
let's see. Oh, but remember, and that had 29 days.
That
Right.
we had an extra day that year
And
too.
yeah,
The thing about President's Day weekend, as you look at some of these weekend numbers, are just gargantuan. Now, there is no doubt we will be far surpassing last year's
yeah,
total. Last
yep.
year, $97.3 million all in, led by
For the 4 days,
One
Mike.
One Love
For the
for
4
the
days.
4 days. This year, I who knows where it's going to be, but I would think with Captain America, Brave New World pushing that, anywhere from $80-90 million for the 4 days. Maybe it gets more. Paddington, I hear, is fantastic. Paddington in Peru, which has been breaking Paddington records in any market that it's
It
opened
has.
so far.
You know,
And kids films have dominated in the last,
absolutely PG,
sort
baby.
of 8 weeks. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I know we hate combining titles, but Captain Paddington. I mean,
I like that. Captain
You know,
Paddington.
I came up with
might
that.
use that this weekend.
Captain Paddington, baby.
Right.
But Paul, did you
So-
figure out what last year was for February?
Yeah, for the including the leap day or whatever.
Yeah.
373.4.
It was 373. Okay, so
No, I mean you're right on. I mean a whole month basically, doing barely more than the president's weekend back in 2018. So it can be an incredible weekend. I really think. I mean, even though the year is up 12% or so over last year at this point, we really have not had that big weekend, and we're finally going to get it. I feel like we're just getting, like we've talked about, we're just getting the motor warmed up. We're just getting going. And then this will be, I think, where we're really going to see the numbers take off. When you think about that, what could this weekend be up 70% versus the same, President's Week or something like that, President's Weekend a year ago? I'm just doing the math in my head. But, that's pretty amazing. We're going to start seeing that year-to-date advantage.
really
advantage.
start to increase. I mean, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, you're going to look, 2024 is going to be, quickly disappearing in the rearview mirror.
And 24 was an outlier in the sense of, we had the strikes and the work stoppages, the release calendars we've talked about many times before on the show. But I think it's going to be a really interesting weekend. I hope Companion makes some noise out there, even though it opened a couple of weeks ago. It's a very interesting movie. It'd be an interesting choice. And I do want to mention that Bridget Jones, I forget what this new one's called, but the new Bridget Jones movie is not going into theaters in the U.S. market. And it's going to be on Peacock. Internationally, in the UK, it's going to play big. It's kind of disappointing. I understand perhaps why they decided not put it in theaters. I don't want to get too much into it. I don't want to second guess the logic, but for Valentine's, it seems like it'd be a perfect movie for theaters this week for the Valentine's weekend. Thoughts?
I'm going to segue into, we haven't prepared this question yet, so I'm going to get you guys off the top of your head. Was having a conversation with one of a production head last week, and we were going over what do we think the highest grossing film for 2025 will be. And again, last year, if you would ask me this question, I would not have come close because I don't think we would have looked at either Inside Out or Deadpool and said, yeah, those are $650 million movies.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that the outlier is out there, given what you know, what would you think will be the highest grossing film of the year?
And we can edit in our prediction.
I'm going to half answer that question. I think the weekend of Mission Impossible and Lilo and Stitch is going to be the biggest weekend of the year.
Oh, look at that.
Very
That
nice.
is going out on a limb. I like it.
I like it.
Because I think they're both very strong films. I think that there's something about Mission Impossible that to me feels like, this is just intuition, but feels like it's ready for a comeback. Because the last Mission Impossible didn't do as well for a lot of different reasons that were specific to the release date and everything. And I think Tom Cruise, he's sort of this sort of patriotic personality that I think that people are ready for. And then a kids film, a major kids film, I think can do well as counter programming. So
Those are great. Those are great. I'm going with Avatar, Fire and Ash.
Well, remember though, you only get 2 weeks of the year.
I thought you meant Lifetime for any
Well,
movie.
Lifetime, I would agree with you probably on that. But if
for
you
the for the calendar,
yeah,
I mean, Thaddeus makes a pretty strong case. Superman for me, I'm hoping it's so good and that it revives the whole Superman situation in DC, and that it absolutely kicks ass and really takes off. I don't know because I haven't seen it and we haven't seen it yet, but kind of going with that one. But it's, that's why they're called predictions, because we just don't know. And you're right, Mike. If you had asked me, was Inside Out 2 going to be the highest grossing film released last year, I've been, oh no, maybe not. I wouldn't have thought of that one.
What do you think, Mike? Answer your own question.
Mike,
What do you
I'm
think?
going to answer my own question. I'm going to use the same title I used last year, only part 2, and that would be Wicked. Wicked's sitting at 471 right now. I think, that's $450 million probably, if not more, for
In the
part
calendar.
2. And we will, that's the conservative bet. I would not be surprised if there was a movie that popped up that ended up doing, 500, 550.
Mike,
But it'll
think
be a
about
movie that, as the movie gods always do, that, none of us see at this point.
Well, I mean, and then if you look at, we're way getting ahead of ourselves, but if you look at Thanksgiving, which was so amazing in 24, when you have Wicked and then Zootopia and then Five Nights at Freddy's and then Avatar, Fire and Ash going towards the end of the year, man, that's going to be pretty incredible.
That's a hell of a fourth quarter, yeah.
It is a hell of a
It actually says something, I think, about the 2025 release calendars. There's 8 or 10 films in the conversation. And I think in 2024, you wouldn't say that. You'd say there are 4 or 5 films in the conversation.
Well, and going back to 24, I remember Paul and I talking about some of these, and, if you were at this point and again, I think anyone who says differently is other than a Pixar animator, you probably had Inside Out, maybe doing 150, 175, somewhere around there, just given the track record, what was going on in the animation space. I remember we were looking at the summer and we were all going, okay, there's 3 movies. There's Minions, there's Inside Out, and there's Deadpool. And outside of that, it's going to be tough sledding. Well, that ended up not being the case.
Dude, I had a journalist ask me, he's doing an article about Jurassic World, and is the bloom off the rose because the 3 films made a little less. The Jurassic World, not going back to the original Jurassic Park films, all of them made over $1 billion worldwide. So it's hard to call that a thing like a negative, but still they did diminish. But I think it's still a brand. You're not going to bet against Jurassic at all. I mean, I told the journalist, not a theater owner in the world would say, I don't want that movie because the last one made just over $1 billion instead of $1.5 billion.
Well,
I don't see it.
Again, you look, like Thaddeus brought up Mission Impossible. And the thing about the Mission Impossible movies, and I did this a couple of years ago, those open to around $60 million. That is what they have done historically. That's pretty much where they live. I wouldn't be surprised if this one being kind of what's perceived to be the last one, even though Tom has said he would come back, that 60 million is kind of where you got to put it until it doesn't, and when you look at the Jurassic movies, it's the same way. They're around 300 million domestically total. And until it's not, that's what you pencil it in for.
Mike, I'm glad you brought up, and Thaddeus, I'm glad you brought up Mission Impossible, because Mission Impossible films, not known for these, there's never been one that opened to 100 million domestically in its opening weekend, but they have great multiples. Mission Impossible, 1996, 3.98 multiple. Mission Impossible 2, 2000, 3.72 multiple of the opening weekend. Mission Impossible 3, 2.81. You go on, they're all in the 3s, basically, right around there as an average. except for Ghost Protocol, but that had a limited release and IMAX
Right.
at first. But in any event, all great multiples, meaning that audiences love them. They play out. I think a lot of
Globally
people
too. Internationally, they do exceptionally well outside of the
Yeah.
U.S. and Canada too. Yeah.
Yeah. So much to look forward to. I think we're going to have so much to talk about
Yeah.
on the podcast, on the Ticket to Ride podcast. Thaddeus Bouchard, Mike Polydorus, Paul Tagarabedian. And we just, as a station note or whatever you want to call it, I forget what they call that, but we're going to have this available always on YouTube as well. And wherever records and tapes are sold, you can listen to it. We're going to just continue on and with more great content. We're going to have special guests in the future. I'm just saying this now, so we have to do it, guys.
Yes, no, I mean, we keep talking about these special guests. I think it's time to get the booking agent out and get that taken care of.
Absolutely. No, this was a great one, guys. I love that this is what you get on Ticket to Ride. You get a Super Bowl recap. You get a look ahead to President's Weekend and Valentine's Day. And again, it's just, we hope great listening for everyone. And we should mention, that there have been some interesting Valentine's movies that opened on Valentine's Day. Do you want to know what they are?
What were they, Paul?
Yeah.
Well, I have to go look them up. So, editor, but no, I know Silence of the Lambs is one of them.
Nothing says Valentine's Day like
Right.
Silence of the Lambs.
Absolutely. Let me
By
just.
the way, that is back to what Thaddeus was talking about. And again, when you're releasing movies, don't put yourself in a box, is what it comes
Absolutely.
down to. And just because it doesn't feel like it's the right time doesn't mean it's not the right time to open it. And again, we've talked about it over and over again. And the release calendar is a giant jigsaw puzzle. And you're looking when you're figuring out where you want to put your movie, you're looking, where do I have the best possible chance for success? And, do I have a horror movie that I'm putting up against an animated movie? Do I have an action movie I'm putting up against, a family drama or something like that? Like, you're looking for those counter programming opportunities. You're looking for, has it been 3 months since there's been a horror film in the marketplace? Should I put something there? We saw that in such a big way last year with the animated movies. Remember, we went all the way from Minions to, I believe it was Wild Robot. We did not have an animated movie, and Wild Robot opened up to about 30, I believe it was, somewhere in there. And that movie just cranked it out and just kept playing.
Well,
'Cause
Mike,
again, there's an appetite for that.
and these rules that, when they're broken, actually can bear a lot of fruit. Oh, the other one, Wayne's World, opened February 14, 1992. So Wayne's World, a great Valentine's movie, and Silence of the Lambs, and they must have purposefully done this because February 14, when Silence of the Lambs opened, was on a Thursday.
So they were
interesting.
definitely looking for that.
Yeah, they were picking that date on purpose. So
Guys, one movie I wanted to give kudos to from the last weekend that opened up, did a hell of a job too, was Becoming Led Zeppelin. And we talked about that one a few weeks ago. Movie went out, did over $7,500 a screen in 369 locations, 2.5
all IMAX, right,
million.
Mike?
All IMAX this week. Next week, they are expanding the footprint into a more traditional theaters. But, you're talking about the last studio album for Led Zeppelin released in 1979. So what are we looking at? 45 years, and they are as relevant as ever. That's amazing.
Hey, Mike, I like that you become a major Zeppelin fan. I don't know that you
Right.
were. I mean, I know you are.
Right.
By the way, anyone who knows me knows I'm not, but I can appreciate the, the craft and what they've contributed to music and music history. Speaking of
Is
which,
this the part of the podcast where we turn on the black lights, all of us?
yes,
And
now
we get
we
the
go.
t-shirts
I
on.
finally saw Paul's one of his favorite movies from last year, and that was A Complete Unknown. And wow, what a great movie! And
I
again,
knew you'd love it, Mike.
it was. So this just tells you what a great actor Timothée Chalamet is, because last year he was playing the whimsical Willy Wonka, who, everything was rose-colored. This year he's playing the dark and brooding Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And
The range.
he was absolutely fantastic in both.
I
Not
love
to
the
mention
movie.
his character in Dune as well. So
Wait, Mike, I've got.
What do you got there, Paul?
Show and tell.
Show and tell. I like it. He's got something. What do we got?
Cool.
Oh, look at that.
It's on red vinyl. What I
Yeah,
do?
wow.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, we should be like a Rolling Stone. And
Good one. By the
Yeah.
way, I'm going to leave you with this, guys. Next big music documentary is Becoming the Monkees. Okay? That's
Wow.
that's
actually,
what I
that,
want to see.
yeah, that would be such a fascinating, that would be a great doc.
We'll have to get our costume department on that for the next podcast. So yeah.
Well, there's so many stories about some of those songs,
Mhm.
but that's for another day.
Yep.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks
Okay.
for listening,
All right.
everyone. Ticket to Ride Season 2
Okay.
in the hopper.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Ciao, everyone.
Have a good one,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care. My baby don't care.